Hey, it's Doris with All The Books. I have my bag of books here. I thought that I would share my rankings of the books that I read last week during my ridiculous let's try to read 14 books in a week-a-thon to compensate for my book outlet haul from Black Friday, just after Thanksgiving here in the States. So yes, I talked about these books, most of them, while I was reading them during my daily vlogging process. So I will just mention them briefly here and tell you how I have ranked them, again, in under 60 seconds. So no deep thoughts with the rankings, just, initial thoughts. So here we go. Coming in at number 12 is We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. Gorgeous book. You're going to be disappointed in me, some of you, but I really was incredibly bored by this. I don't know. The writing, I can tell, is really fabulous. I don't know if I just don't like, mysteries. This was like a combination of Alice in Wonderland and Lemony Snicket. But instead of going on adventures, they stayed at home and talked about their evil neighbors, horrible family members, and those who came to visit. So, yeah. Maybe I just like adventures more. But there's a cat. And then number 11 was The Three Escapes of Hannah Arendt by Ken Crimstein. This one, or Crimstein, yeah, I didn't love the art style, but really the problem here, this is a biography of Hannah Arendt and her philosophical ideas and some of her influencers. So there will be pages where they talk about other philosophical ideas and those who came up with them. And the problem here is that philosophy is just not my thing at all. It bores me to tears. So there's that. And then number 10 was Alice Hoffman's Incantation. This turned out to be a YA novella based in the Spanish Inquisition, the persecution of the Jews. And it was really fine. I thoroughly enjoyed reading it. It was just brief. It wasn't anything spectacular, just, enjoyable. And I think a period in time that I haven't read as much of. And then next up, I've lost count already, but the memoirs of Margarita Engel. So Enchanted Air and Soaring Earth. Enchanted Air is her early years, so elementary and middle school. And then the Soaring Earth is high school and university, young adult years, finding herself. So she writes in free verse form, and I typically love her writing. This was, beautiful as always. I enjoyed learning more of her as well. She is Cuban American. Her mother was Cuban and her father was from the States, but of, I believe, Ukrainian heritage. So really interesting. And, she traveled a lot between the States and Cuba and elsewhere as a child. Very well-traveled woman. And I enjoyed them. I just felt like they didn't have as much depth as you would expect being memoirs. And, in comparison with some of her other works like Silver People. Anyway, and then next I have Vietnam America by G.B. Tran. This is another graphic novel. This one is a memoir of G.B. Tran's life. He I believe, was born in the States, but his mother was pregnant with him when they fled Vietnam. And I liked this. This was very historical during the time period. I just had trouble following the family members. He jumped around and told, it's told through a visit back to Vietnam 20 years later when he's 30. Maybe it's 30 years later then. Sorry. But yeah, I had trouble following who he was with and where in time. And again, the emotional depth wasn't there as much. I would recommend reading this with Thi Bui's memoir. I forget the name of that one, but her last name is Thi. Her name is Thibui. Really lovely memoir that she put out, but these would pair nicely. And then we have Ebola by David Kwan. This was great. This was my first nonfiction by David Kwan, and I really enjoyed his writing style. He's a fabulous nonfiction writer in the sciences. And the only reason this one isn't ranked any higher is because of the publishing date, I would say. So he published this, I believe, in like 2009 or somewhere around there, and the major Ebola outbreak and new discoveries were in 2014 and subsequently. So I think this one is just, it's dated, not in the information provided, but in that there have been new developments since it was put out. So yes. There's another one that I want to get by Richard Preston, and it's not The Hot Zone, which is a fictionalized account written like in the 90s or something. But I think it's called The Hot Zone. No, that's the one I just said. Anyway, the Richard Preston, he has a nonfiction that's newer than this that I want to get. And then we have The Perfect Horse by Elizabeth Lett. This one is a World War II novel by the same author as the $80 Champion that I read last month and really enjoyed. So these two books would pair nicely as well because they talk about the world at large going from an agrarian society to an industrialized society, not just in lifestyle, but also in war. So this one is more set in Europe during World War II, and the $80 Champion is in the States, and it deals with an immigrant story from someone who fled Europe after World War II, but some flashbacks during World War II. This one is very informative, and if you are into horses or World War II, this would be a good addition to your collection. As a story, and I realize it's nonfiction, but as a story, the way she wrote it, the story arc and the themes didn't hold together as tightly as the $80 Champion. But she dabbles into some neat things. Not neat, that's not a good word, but very insightful with eugenics and breeding of these horses. And yeah, there's just a lot of brief periods of boredom in this book interspersed with the really interesting stuff. So like I said, it just doesn't hold together as tightly, but it's super interesting and informative at the same time. So there's that. And then we have The Fountains of Silence by Ruta Sepetys. This is her new release. Ruta Sepetys bills herself as a crossover author in that she writes her books for the young adult audience, but they are widely read by adults as well. This one is set in Spain during Franco's reign and focuses on a group of young people. So you have Anna, who lives in Spain, her older sister and her husband and their young baby, her brother Rafa and his best friend Fugu, their cousin Puri, and a boy from the States who was over there visiting. His mother was originally from Spain, but has married and moved to the States with a Texas cowboy. So yeah, they're all right around the 18-year-old, 20-year-old time frame, I would say. And yeah, this was fabulous. Time period that I, again, have not read much of. And, you know, it's neat thinking about this paired with The Incantation by Alice Hoffman, you know, also set in Spain, but much, much earlier in time. But yeah, this one started out pretty slowly, but I didn't mind that. The chapters were really short and fast to get through. But I liked that she really took the time to develop the characters since there were so many. I never felt like I was confused with the characters as we got into the story. And it really sped up the second half with the plot twist. Oh my. So, great book. And then Sarah Hall's Sudden Traveler. This is a short story collection. And if you recall, Sean and I read a Sarah Hall about the foxes a month or so ago. And it was okay. You know, the writing was really nice, but the story didn't blow me away. These are just, wow. Her writing in here is stellar. Now, I would say 90% of this has dark undertones. So, and I definitely would give trigger warnings for rape, child rape, and suicide. But her writing is just stunning. The first short story is kind of a little bit of a fantasy, or a lot of a fantasy bent to it, but very stylized. It reminded me of Vita Nostra, but in a really good way that it made sense and really worked. And then the others are, you know, not all fantasy at all. You know, real life. And, oh, this is just gorgeous. There was one with a stepfather. Oh my gosh, it was heart-wrenchingly gorgeous. And then the surprise of my month thus far has been Monk by Youssef Daoudi. This is another graphic novel. This one is about Monk, who was a jazz artist, and his, I guess maybe a benefactress, sort of, but a really, really good friend, Panonica. And I just loved it. I absolutely loved it. Call me ignorant. I didn't really know anything about Monk. This was a complete impulse buy. And the way this author illustrator made the music dance on the page was just brilliant. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Great read. Highly, highly recommend, especially if you're into music and jazz. But the time period as well, whatever it was. Sorry. And then Gilead by Marilyn Robinson. Oh my gosh. I loved this with every fiber of my being. This book was so beautiful. It tore me up. It really did. Just thinking about the difference between religion and faith and your own internal struggles with what you believe and how you believe it, dipping into historical timelines and how that has impacted religion and faith through the years, from the Civil War all the way through World War II, and how, you know, your family members and what they believe impacts you, and, you know, the things that happen to you and you experience over time. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. This book is never preachy. It is just to the heart of the story. And it's probably the best book that I have read this decade. And I'm so eager to read Jack's story in Home. I really can't wait. So yes, that's it. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll be back soon. Bye.